Flight attendant Tanya Wilson's face contorts with disdain as she towers over 17-year-old Zara Washington in first class. "You need to move to economy where you belong," she hisses. Minutes later, the pilot's jaw drops as Governor Washington storms aboard demanding, "Why is my daughter being treated this way?" Before we dive into this shocking story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in this incredible tale of justice. At 300,000 feet, Zara Washington was not your average 17-year-old. With a brilliant mind that absorbed constitutional law, like most teens absorb social media trends, she had already set her sights on becoming the youngest Supreme Court justice in American history. Her bedroom walls weren't plastered with pop stars, but with framed portraits of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Thurgood Marshall, and Sonia Sotomayor. Her nightstand groaned under the weight of law books, not fashion magazines. But Zara's extraordinary path wasn't paved by chance. She was the daughter of Imani Washington, the first black female governor of Virginia, a woman who had shattered so many glass ceilings that she kept a symbolic jar of glass shards on her office desk as a reminder of the battles she'd fought. Never let them define your altitude, Governor Washington would tell Zara whenever they faced yet another incident of discrimination. It was their private mantra formed through years of enduring sidelong glances at upscale restaurants, security guards following them through department stores, and the endless questions about their legitimacy in spaces of power. Despite living in the governor's mansion and attending Westfield Academy, the most prestigious private school in Richmond, Zara couldn't escape the subtle racism that permeated her daily life. There were the history teachers who seemed surprised when she aced exams on the Constitution, the classmates who touched her hair without permission, and the parents who assumed she was there on scholarship rather than merit. Mom Dylan's father asked if I was enjoying my diversity opportunity at Westfield. Zara had reported just last week over dinner. Governor Washington had simply reached across the table, squeezed her daughter's hand, and said, "His ignorance doesn't diminish your brilliance." Now, as Zara packed for her solo trip to New York to attend the Young Leaders Law Seminar at Columbia University, Governor Washington couldn't help but hover anxiously in the doorway of her daughter's bedroom. "Are you sure you have everything? Boarding pass ID?" The confirmation email from the program, the governor usually so composed on the legislative floor, was a bundle of maternal nerves. Zara smiled as she zipped her suitcase. "Mom, I've triple-checked everything. And yes, I packed the pepper spray, though I doubt I'll need it at an academic conference." Governor Washington sighed. "It's not just about the conference. It's your first time traveling alone. And I'll be fine." Zara finished crossing the room to hug her mother. "Besides, you're the one who always says I need to spread my wings." I know. The governor smoothed her daughter's curls. "I just wish I could fly with you, but this budget meeting is important for the entire state," Zara completed. "I understand, Mom. Really." Governor Washington smiled, reaching into her pocket. "Well, since I can't be there, I wanted to make sure you'd be comfortable." She handed Zara a ticket confirmation. "First class. You've earned it with your academic achievements this year." Zara's eyes widened. "Mom, that's too much." "Nonsense. My daughter deserves the best." She kissed Zara's forehead. "Consider it practice for when you're flying to Washington for Supreme Court sessions." The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect flying weather. At Richmond International Airport, Governor Washington walked Zara as far as security would allow her security detail, keeping a respectful distance. "Remember," the governor began. "Never let them define my altitude," Zara finished with a grin. As they embraced, Governor Washington's phone buzzed insistently. She checked it and grimaced. "Emergency at the Capitol. I have to go." "Go save Virginia, Mom. I've got this." With one last hug, Governor Washington watched her daughter join the security line, unaware that their family mantra would be put to the test sooner than either could imagine. Richmond International Airport hummed with the controlled chaos of a Friday morning. Business travelers clutched coffee cups like lifelines, while families corralled excited children and mountains of luggage. Zara Washington stood in the security line, boarding pass in hand, mentally reviewing her presentation for the seminar while trying to ignore the weight of stares from fellow travelers. The TSA agent barely glanced at the IDs of the 3 white businessmen ahead of her. But when Zara stepped forward, he studied her driver's license with exaggerated care, looking from the photo to her face, repeatedly. "This says you're 17, he said, suspicion lacing his voice. "Yes, sir," Zara replied, evenly maintaining the poise her mother had taught her. Always professional, never showing frustration. "And you're flying alone?" The question hung in the air, inappropriate and unnecessary. "Yes, sir. To attend a law seminar at Columbia University." She offered this additional information, strategically knowing from experience that contextualizing her presence sometimes eased suspicion. The agent raised an eyebrow, but handed back her ID with reluctance. "First class." His tone suggested she had somehow acquired the ticket illegitimately. Before Zara could respond, a man in an expensive suit pushed past her, cutting directly in front of her in line. "Excuse me," Zara said firmly. "I was next." The man, Brandon Cooper, according to the luggage tag on his briefcase, turned with an expression of mild surprise, as if shocked that she would speak up. "Sorry, kid. Tight connection." He didn't move, and the security agent made no effort to correct the situation. Zara took a deep breath. "Choose your battles." Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. She stepped back, allowing him to proceed. As Zara finally placed her backpack on the conveyor belt, she noticed the security officer motioning to a colleague. She recognized what was coming next before it even happened. "Miss, you've been randomly selected for additional screening," announced a TSA agent who had suddenly appeared beside her. Random. The word almost made Zara laugh. There was nothing random about it. This was the 3rd random screening she'd experienced in her last 4 flights. 20 minutes later, after having her natural hair patted down and her belongings swabbed for explosive residue, Zara checked her watch in growing alarm. The additional screening had taken so long that her boarding time was already underway. She rushed through the terminal, reaching her gate just as the final boarding call was announced. Breathless, she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent. "Just made it," the agent said, scanning her ticket. "Though you might want to arrive earlier next time to avoid rushing." The subtle accusation that Zara's lateness was due to irresponsibility rather than unwarranted security delays stung. Finally boarding the plane, Zara navigated the narrow aisle toward the first-class cabin. As she approached the dividing curtain, a flight attendant, different from the one greeting passengers at the door, stepped forward with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I think you might be confused, sweetie. Economy boarding is nearly complete, but you can still make your way to the back." "I'm in first class," Zara replied, extending her boarding pass. "Seat 3 amperes." The flight attendant, whose name tag read Tanya Wilson, took the boarding pass with visible skepticism. Her eyes widened slightly as she confirmed the information, but her smile remained rigid. "I see. Right this way." As Zara settled into the plush leather seat, she couldn't help but notice the glances from other first-class passengers, primarily older white men in business attire, who seemed to be mentally questioning her presence in their exclusive domain. Across the aisle, she recognized Brandon Cooper from the security line, now watching her with undisguised amusement. Zara took out her book on constitutional law, a clear signal she wasn't interested in conversation. As she opened to her bookmarked page, she allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Despite the obstacles placed in her path, she had made it. She was exactly where she deserved to be. Little did she know her battle for this seat had only just begun. "Can I see your boarding pass again?" Zara looked up from her constitutional law textbook to find Tanya Wilson hovering over her seat, hand extended expectantly. Around them, pre-flight service was in full swing, with other first-class passengers already enjoying their complimentary beverages. "I showed it to you when I boarded," Zara replied, maintaining her composure while reaching for her phone where she had saved a digital copy. Tanya's lips tightened. "It's procedure to verify." Her tone implied it was procedure only for passengers who looked like Zara. Displaying the digital boarding pass, Zara watched as Tanya scrutinized it far longer than necessary for a simple verification. The flight attendant's eyes narrowed at the screen. "And you have ID to confirm this is your boarding pass." From across the aisle, Brandon Cooper snickered into his scotch. Other passengers were beginning to take notice, some watching with uncomfortable expressions, while others seemed disturbingly entertained by Zara's humiliation. Wordlessly, Zara produced her driver's license. As Tanya examined it, comparing the name to the boarding pass with exaggerated care, Zara noticed how the woman hadn't asked any other first-class passengers for this level of verification. "Everything seems in order," Tanya finally admitted, though her tone suggested the opposite. "Would you like something to drink before takeoff?" "Water, please," Zara replied. When Tanya returned, minutes later, she practically dropped the plastic cup on Zara's tray table, causing water to splash onto her book. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Tanya said without a hint of regret. Meanwhile, she had delivered Brandon Cooper's refill with a warm smile and steady hand. Zara dabbed at her book with a napkin, breathing deeply through her frustration. This wasn't her first encounter with discriminatory treatment, and her mother had taught her to document everything. Discreetly, she opened her phone's note app and began recording the time and details of these interactions. As the boarding process completed and the economy cabin filled, Zara noticed Tanya engaged in whispered conversation with another flight attendant, both glancing repeatedly in her direction. The second attendant approached. "Excuse me, miss, but we're having an issue with the passenger manifest. Could you confirm how you purchased this ticket?" The question was inappropriate and invasive. Zara's ticket was legitimate, and her method of purchase was irrelevant to her right to occupy the seat. "My mother purchased it as a gift," Zara answered truthfully, maintaining eye contact. "Is there a problem?" "It's just unusual for someone your age to be traveling alone in first class," the attendant replied. Brandon Cooper leaned across the aisle. "Maybe she won it in a contest," he suggested with mock helpfulness, his voice just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. A few chuckled. Zara straightened her posture. "I don't see how my age is relevant to the ticket my mother purchased." She deliberately avoided mentioning her mother's position, having learned early in life that trading on her parents' authority created its own complications. The plane had completed boarding now, but Tanya appeared again, this time with a tablet in hand. "I'm sorry, but there seems to be an overbooking situation." "In first class," she announced, addressing Zara directly, despite the fact that she was clearly not the last person to board. "We need to move you to an economy seat." Zara felt heat rising in her cheeks but kept her voice level. "That's not possible. I have a confirmed first-class ticket that was purchased weeks ago." Tanya's smile tightened. "It's standard procedure to relocate passengers when necessary. I'm sure you'll be more comfortable in economy anyway, with passengers more similar to yourself." The implication hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats while others pretended to be absorbed in their devices. "I decline to be relocated," Zara stated firmly. "My ticket is for this seat, and there is no legitimate reason to move me." Tanya's facade of politeness cracked. This isn't a negotiation. Either move voluntarily to economy, or we'll have to remove you from the flight entirely." The threat was clear and public. Heads turned throughout the first-class cabin, creating an audience for Zara's humiliation. Brandon Cooper didn't even attempt to hide his smirk as he sipped his drink, watching the scene unfold like personal entertainment. "On what grounds would I be removed?" Zara asked, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "Non-compliance with crew member instructions," Tanya replied immediately, as if she'd been waiting for the question. "Now, are you going to move to economy, or do we need to contact the captain about a disruptive passenger?" In that moment, Zara felt the weight of the decision before her. She could capitulate to avoid escalation, as many in her position had been forced to do countless times throughout history. Or she could stand her ground, knowing the potential consequences. The entire first-class cabin seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. Zara's fingers trembled slightly as she gripped the armrests of her first-class seat. The air in the cabin felt thick with tension as every eye focused on her, the lone black teenager being ordered to surrender her rightful place. Years of her mother's careful coaching echoed through her mind. "Document everything, remain calm, know your rights." "I'd like to call my mother," Zara said, reaching for her phone. Tanya's hand shot forward, hovering threateningly. "All devices need to be in airplane mode now. We're preparing for departure." Yet Brandon Cooper, across the aisle, was still openly texting, a fact Tanya deliberately ignored. "This is discrimination," Zara stated clearly, wanting witnesses to hear. "I have a valid ticket for this seat, and you have no legitimate reason to relocate me." A murmur rippled through the first-class cabin. Most passengers averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by their safety cards or the clouds outside their windows. The burden of acknowledging injustice was too heavy for their comfortable lives. "Young lady, I'm simply following procedure," Tanya insisted, her voice carrying a warning edge. From 2 rows ahead, an elderly white man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses turned around. "What procedure exactly?" he asked, his voice carrying the gravitas of someone unaccustomed to being dismissed. "I've flown this airline for 40 years, and I've never seen a passenger with a valid ticket forced to relocate after boarding." Tanya's smile became brittle. "Sir, with all due respect, this doesn't concern you." "I believe it concerns everyone when airline staff single out passengers based on appearance," the man replied calmly. "My name is Harold Reynolds, and I'd like to know the specific regulation that authorizes this relocation." Tanya's face flushed. "Sir, we need all passengers to comply with crew instructions. If you continue to interfere—" "I'm not interfering," Harold interrupted. "I'm requesting information, which is my right as a paying customer." Sensing the momentum shifting, Zara discreetly pressed the record button on her phone. She positioned it casually on her lap camera, facing upward to capture the unfolding scene. "Put that away immediately." Tanya spotted the phone and reached for it. Zara pulled back. "The FAA permits recording as long as devices are in airplane mode during critical flight phases. We haven't pushed back from the gate." Brandon Cooper chuckled from across the aisle. Well, well. Someone's been studying aviation regulations." Tanya's patience evaporated. "That's it. I'm calling the captain." As she stormed toward the cockpit, another flight attendant approached Zara with an apologetic expression. "Maybe it would be easier to just move. We could offer you a voucher for future travel." "Why should I accept compensation for discrimination?" Zara asked loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Would you ask any other passenger with a valid ticket to move without cause?" The standoff had now delayed departure by 15 minutes. Passengers in economy were craning their necks to see what was happening. Someone a few rows back had also begun recording. Tanya returned with a tall man in a pilot's uniform, his captain's stripes gleaming under the cabin lights. "Captain James Sullivan," he introduced himself, his expression guarded. "I understand we have a situation. This passenger refuses to comply with crew instructions to relocate, Tanya stated. Because no valid reason has been provided, Zara countered, maintaining direct eye contact with the captain. I have a confirmed ticket for this seat. Captain Sullivan's eyes flicked to her boarding pass, then to Tanya. What's the issue with the seating assignment? We're overbooked in first class. Tanya insisted, though. Every seat had been filled through normal boarding procedures with no mention of overbooking until Zara was targeted. Harold Reynolds cleared his throat. Captain, I've been observing this situation develop, and it appears this young woman is being singled out. No other first-class passenger has been asked to relocate. The captain's expression tightened as he began to grasp the implications. Miss Wilson, may I speak with you privately? As they stepped away for a hushed conference, Zara used the opportunity to quickly text her mother, being discriminated against on Flight 1372 at Richmond Intel. They're trying to remove me from first class. Gate A. 7. She pressed send just as Captain Sullivan returned. His face had hardened into a mask of professional detachment. Miss Washington, I apologize for the confusion. While we sort this out, I'm going to have to ask you to deplane so that we can depart on schedule. You'll be rebooked on the next available flight. The injustice of it stole Zara's breath. She was being removed not because she had done anything wrong, but because standing up for herself was deemed more inconvenient than addressing the discrimination. I will not voluntarily leave this flight, Zara stated, her voice remarkably steady, despite her racing heart. I have done nothing wrong. Then I'll need to call airport security to escort you off. The captain replied, though he looked increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. As Zara stood to gather her belongings, still recording the live stream counter on her phone indicated that over 300 people were now watching the incident unfold in real time. Her hands shook, but her resolve remained unbroken as she followed Captain Sullivan toward the aircraft door. Do you think Zara should have given up her seat to avoid conflict? Comment number 1, if you believe she was right to stand her ground. Or number 2, if you think she should have moved to prevent escalation. If you've ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling, hit that like button to show solidarity. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of justice and perseverance. What happens when Zara reaches the aircraft door? Will she be forced to leave the flight she rightfully booked? And who might be waiting for her at the gate? Let's continue with this shocking true story. Governor Imani Washington was in the middle of a budget negotiation when her chief of staff, Elaine Morris, slipped into the conference room and discreetly placed a tablet in front of her. On the screen was Zara's live stream, the view slightly tilted as the phone remained partially concealed on her lap. The governor's expression remained neutral, a skill honed through years of political crises, but her eyes hardened as she listened to her daughter being ordered off the plane. Excuse me, everyone, she said, rising from her seat, with the smooth authority that had won her 2 elections. We'll need to reconvene in an hour. An urgent family matter requires my attention. No one dared object. Governor Washington had a reputation for being reasonable but unbending when it came to priorities, and everyone in the room had seen the fierce protectiveness that emerged when it came to her daughter. Have my security detail bring the car around, she instructed Elaine as they strode down the Capitol corridors, and get me the CEO of Atlantic Airways on the phone, now. Within 10 minutes, the governor's motorcade was speeding toward Richmond International Airport, sirens clearing a path through midday traffic. In the back seat, Governor Washington alternated between watching her daughter's live stream and making rapid-fire calls. This is unacceptable, Richard, she told the airline CEO who had been pulled from a board meeting. My 17-year-old daughter is being publicly humiliated and removed from a seat she has every right to occupy. I'm watching it happen in real time. I assure you, Governor, this is not our policy, the CEO stammered, clearly blindsided. Yet it is precisely what your employees are doing. she replied. "Fix it. Immediately." Meanwhile, Zara's video had exploded online. The hashtag number #FlyInWhileBlack was trending nationally within 20 minutes of her first post. Civil rights organizations were already issuing statements, and news vans were converging on the airport from local stations across Richmond. Inside the plane, Captain Sullivan was beginning to realize the magnitude of the situation as his cockpit phone rang with an urgent message from airline headquarters. The dispatchers never called once the boarding door was closed, unless something was seriously wrong. "Captain Sullivan speaking," he answered, stepping away from where Zara stood with her backpack. "James, this is Richard Bertram, CEO. Is there a young woman named Zara Washington on your flight?" Sullivan felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "Yes, sir. We're currently in the process of deplaning her due to a seating dispute." "Stop immediately," the CEO ordered, panic evident in his voice. "That is Governor Washington's daughter, and she is live streaming the entire incident. We already have protesters gathering at our ticket counters in 3 cities. Captain Sullivan's face drained of color as he turned to look at Zara, suddenly seeing not just a teenage girl but a political firestorm in the making. "Sir, I was told there was an overbooking situation." "There is no overbooking," Bertram cut in. "I've already checked the manifest. She has a confirmed first-class ticket. Whatever is happening there needs to stop now. The governor is on her way to the airport." As Sullivan hung up, the ground crew supervisor appeared at the aircraft door, his face ashen. "Captain, we have a situation." Governor Washington has just arrived at the terminal with her security detail and is demanding immediate access to the aircraft. Through the still-open door of the plane, the unmistakable commotion of an approaching VIP delegation echoed down the jetway. Passengers began murmuring and shifting in their seats, phones raised to capture whatever was about to unfold. Governor Imani Washington appeared at the aircraft door like an avenging angel. Her tailored suit immaculate, her security badge prominently displayed, and her expression carved from stone. Behind her stood 4 state troopers and the airport director, who looked like he wanted to melt into the carpet. "Captain Sullivan?" she inquired, with glacial politeness. "Yes, ma'am," he confirmed, instinctively straightening his posture. "I understand you're attempting to remove my daughter from her ticketed seat. I'd like an explanation." Though phrased as a request, everyone present recognized it as a demand. Before Sullivan could formulate a response, Tanya Wilson stepped forward. "Governor Washington, there was a misunderstanding regarding seating assignments." "Was there?" The governor cut her off with surgical precision. "Because from the video I watched, along with thousands of others online, now it appears my daughter was being discriminated against. She presented a valid ticket for her assigned seat and was still ordered to relocate without cause." By now, every passenger on the plane was watching the confrontation. Brandon Cooper had shrunk in his seat, suddenly fascinated by the emergency exit card. Other first-class passengers looked mortified to be associated with the incident. From the economy section, someone called out, "We saw the whole thing, Governor. They singled her out." Captain Sullivan, a veteran pilot with 20 years of experience, handling everything from mechanical failures to medical emergencies, found himself completely unprepared for this situation. "Governor Washington, on behalf of the airline, I deeply apologize for this incident. Of course, your daughter is welcome to return to her seat immediately." "That's not sufficient," the governor replied. "I want a formal acknowledgement that what occurred here was discriminatory treatment, and I want the names of every employee involved." As if on cue, 2 men in expensive suits appeared behind the Governor Airline executives who had been in Richmond for a conference and were scrambled to the scene by their panicking CEO. Governor Washington, the older one, began. "I'm Thomas Reynolds, Senior Vice President of Customer Experience. We are conducting an immediate investigation into this incident and offer our sincerest apologies. We'd like to offer full refunds and additional compensation." "My daughter doesn't need your money," Governor Washington interrupted. "She needs and deserves equal treatment." What she experienced today is what countless travelers of color endure daily. Only most don't have a parent who can make you listen. She turned to Zara. "Are you all right?" Zara nodded, her composure remarkable despite the situation. "I'm fine, Mom." The governor addressed the executives again. "Here's what's going to happen. My daughter will take her rightfully purchased seat. Your flight will depart. And tomorrow morning, I expect your CEO in my office to discuss how Atlantic Airways plans to address the systemic discrimination in your corporate culture." Outside the plane, the media presence had swelled. Passengers were texting and emailing video clips to news outlets while social media exploded with commentary and support for Zara. What had begun as one more routine instance of discrimination had transformed into a national conversation about race privilege and corporate accountability, all because one teenager had refused to surrender her dignity. A tense silence blanketed the first-class cabin as Zara returned to seat 3 amperes. Governor Washington stood in the aisle, her presence commanding respect even from those who might have disagreed with her politics. Tanya Wilson had been escorted off the plane by airline management, her face ashen with the realization that her actions would have consequences beyond this flight. "I apologize for the delay." "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Sullivan announced over the intercom, his voice strained with professional composure. "We'll be pushing back from the gate shortly. Flight attendants prepare for departure." As the replacement flight attendant offered Zara a fresh beverage with exaggerated courtesy, Brandon Cooper leaned across the aisle. "Governor Washington," he said, his voice dripping with sudden sycophantic charm. "Brandon Cooper, CEO of Vertex Technologies. I just want to say what an honor it is to meet you. Your infrastructure bill last year created tremendous opportunities for companies like mine." The governor fixed him with a penetrating stare. "Mr. Cooper, did you witness my daughter being discriminated against?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I wouldn't exactly call it." "Then you did witness it," she interrupted and chose to remain silent, perhaps even found it entertaining. She turned away dismissively. "I'm familiar with Vertex Technologies. Your bid for the state cybersecurity contract is under review, I believe." Cooper paled visibly and retreated into his seat, suddenly absorbed in his phone. As Governor Washington prepared to deplane, she embraced Zara tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Call me when you land." Mom, Zara asked quietly, "How did you know what was happening?" The governor smiled. "You're not the only one who knows how to use technology. I set up alerts for your social media activity after that incident at the debate tournament last year." She squeezed her daughter's hand. "Never let them define your altitude, remember?" As the governor departed, Harold Reynolds, the elderly gentleman who had spoken up for Zara, moved to an empty seat beside her. "Miss Washington, I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I wanted to introduce myself properly. Harold Reynolds, retired civil rights attorney." Zara's eyes widened with recognition. "Harold Reynolds. You argued Crawford versus National Transportation Board." The old man chuckled, pleased at being recognized. "I'm impressed you know that case. It's not exactly light reading for most teenagers. It established the precedent that transportation providers couldn't use customer comfort as a justification for discriminatory seating policies Zara recited. We studied it in my constitutional law club." Indeed, Harold nodded approvingly. "And unfortunately, what happened to you today proves that despite legal victories, the battle continues in practice." He handed her a business card. "I'd like to offer my services pro bono should you and your mother wish to pursue this matter further." Meanwhile, airline executives huddled in the jetway phones pressed to ears as they received instructions from headquarters. The director of communications rushed toward the growing media presence at the gate, attempting to control the narrative even as Zara's video surpassed 1 million views. Inside the terminal, protesters had begun to gather. Civil rights activists who happened to be traveling through Richmond joined with everyday citizens outraged by what they'd seen online. They held hastily made signs bearing slogans like "First-class citizens deserve first-class seats" and "Number flying while black matters." Back on the plane, as the door finally closed and the aircraft pushed back from the gate, passengers from economy came forward one by one, ignoring the flight attendant's instructions to remain seated to offer Zara their support. "My daughter showed me your video," said a middle-aged woman with a Midwestern accent. "You handled yourself with such grace." "Thank you for standing your ground," added a young Latino man. "Too many times I've given up my seat just to avoid the scene." As the plane taxied toward the runway, Harold leaned closer to Zara. "There's something you should know," he said quietly. "This situation with Atlantic Airways goes deeper than one flight attendant's prejudice." He glanced around before continuing. "My granddaughter Amara experienced almost identical treatment on one of their flights last year. She was 16, traveling to a science competition." "What happened?" Zara asked. Harold's eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. The stress of the public humiliation triggered her asthma. She had a severe attack in the terminal after being removed from the flight. By the time emergency services reached her, his voice faltered. "I'm so sorry," Zara whispered, understanding the unspoken conclusion. "Since then, I've been gathering evidence." Harold continued, his voice strengthening. "Atlantic Airways has a pattern of such incidents, but they typically settle quietly with non-disclosure agreements. What happened today with a governor's daughter, no less, might finally force meaningful change." As the plane accelerated down the runway, Zara gazed out the window at Richmond falling away beneath her. In the space of an hour, what should have been a simple trip to an academic seminar had transformed into something much larger than herself. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a purpose. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "CNN is covering the story. This is bigger than us now. Use your voice wisely." Zara looked at Harold, then at the countless supportive faces turned toward her from throughout the cabin. "I will," she whispered, both to her absent mother and to herself. "I will." At cruising altitude, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin remained charged with an uncomfortable energy. Most passengers busied themselves with tablets or magazines, avoiding eye contact with Zara, as if proximity to controversy might somehow be contagious. The replacement flight attendant, a young woman named Maya, provided service with excessive cheerfulness that barely masked her anxiety. "More water, Miss Washington," she asked for the third time in 30 minutes. "I'm fine, thank you," Zara replied, wondering if the airline had instructed staff to give her special treatment to compensate for the earlier discrimination, a strategy that missed the point entirely. Meanwhile, Brandon Cooper had spent the first hour of the flight typing furiously on his laptop, occasionally glancing at Zara with calculated appraisal. Finally, he closed his computer and moved to the empty seat across from her uninvited. "Governor Washington's daughter," he began, his voice pitched for privacy, yet deliberately loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." "Did we?" Zara asked, coolly channeling her mother's diplomatic reserve. "Look," Cooper leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What happened earlier was unfortunate, but people like us, people of influence, should stick together. I'd love to discuss potential internship opportunities at Vertex for someone with your obvious talents. Your mother's administration and my company could have a mutually beneficial relationship." Harold Reynolds, who had been pretending to nap, opened one eye. "Sounds like opportunism disguised as apology to me," he remarked dryly. Cooper's expression hardened. "I don't believe I was addressing you, sir." "And I don't believe Miss Washington needs your condescending offer," Harold replied, sitting up straight, "especially when you sat there smirking while she was being discriminated against." Zara intervened with the poise of someone twice her age. "Mr. Cooper, I appreciate your interest in making amends. However, I don't consider career opportunities an appropriate response to witnessing racial discrimination and choosing to remain silent." Cooper's face flushed. "You're making a mistake." I have connections your mother would find valuable for her next campaign. My mother doesn't trade justice for political advantage, Zara replied firmly. And neither do I. If you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for my seminar. Dismissed Cooper returned to his original seat, casting dark glances in their direction for the remainder of the flight. As soon as he was out of earshot, Harold chuckled softly. You handled that masterfully. You have your mother's gift for graceful rejection. Thanks, Zara smiled, though I doubt I was as diplomatic as she would have been. Sometimes diplomacy is overrated, Harold replied. Now tell me about this seminar you're attending. As Zara described the Young Leaders Law Seminar at Columbia, other passengers began to drift into their conversation. First came a black woman doctor from economy who had come forward ostensibly to use the first-class lavatory but stopped to introduce herself. Dr. Monique Taylor, she said, offering her hand. I saw what happened during boarding. I've experienced similar situations so many times I've lost count. Next came a young Asian American flight attendant who whispered to Zara during a quiet moment, what Tanya did was wrong, but she's not the only one. There's an unwritten policy about passenger profile assessment that targets people who look out of place in premium cabins. One by one, an informal alliance formed in the aisle and empty seats around Zara and Harold. Passengers from diverse backgrounds shared similar stories of discrimination in transportation, housing, education, and employment. What began as separate incidents coalesced into a recognizable pattern of systemic inequality. The airline settled with me too, revealed a Latino professor who joined their circle, $15,000 and an NDA after they removed me from a first-class seat I'd paid for. I took the money because I needed it for my mother's medical bills, but I've regretted my silence ever since. Harold nodded knowingly. That's their strategy. Individual settlements with confidentiality clauses prevent the public from seeing the pattern. He turned to Zara. But your case is different. The publicity makes it impossible to bury. As the plane began its descent into New York, Maya approached with an iPad. Miss Washington, the captain, asked me to inform you that there's significant media presence at LaGuardia Airport. Airline representatives will escort you through a private exit if you wish. Zara considered the offer. The private exit represented exactly what Harold had described the airline's attempt to manage the situation quietly to contain the damage. It was the easier path, certainly. She could slip away from the cameras, and reporters attend her seminar as planned and allow the airline's PR team to craft their narrative unchallenged. But easy wasn't always right. Please thank the captain, she said firmly, but I'll be exiting through the main terminal with the other passengers. Maya nodded, understanding passing between them, one young woman of color to another. As the plane touched down at LaGuardia, passengers turned on their phones to discover that number, flying while black, had become the top trending topic nationally. News outlets were running the story alongside historical contexts of transportation discrimination from Claudette Colvin and Rosa Parks to modern airline incidents usually hidden behind corporate settlements. Through the windows they could see the crowd gathering at the terminal, reporters with cameras, protesters with signs, and civil rights leaders ready to make statements. Are you ready for this? Harold asked Zara as the seatbelt sign turned off. Zara took a deep breath, thinking of all the stories she'd just heard of Harold's granddaughter who never made it to her science competition, of her mother who had fought these battles her entire life. Yes, she said, gathering her courage along with her backpack. I think I am. The LaGuardia terminal erupted into controlled chaos as Zara emerged from the jetway with Harold Reynolds beside her. Camera flashes created a strobe light effect, while journalists shouted questions from behind security barriers. A wall of protesters held signs declaring solidarity, their chants echoing through the cavernous space. Miss Washington, how do you feel about Atlantic Airways' statement? Did you know your video has reached 7 million views? Will you be filing a lawsuit against the airline? The questions bombarded her like physical objects. Zara maintained her composure, drawing on years of watching her mother navigate media frenzies, but her heart hammered in her chest. This wasn't what she had planned for her academic weekend. A team of airline representatives in crisp suits materialized, attempting to steer Zara and Harold toward a private conference room. "Miss Washington, we've prepared a space where you can gather your thoughts before addressing the media," one said smoothly. Harold placed a protective hand on Zara's shoulder. "I believe we'll make our own arrangements, thank you." Before the airline representatives could insist, a striking woman in her early 30s cut through the crowd. "Zara Washington, I'm Aisha Robinson, National Legal Defense Coalition. Your mother asked me to meet you." Within minutes, Aisha had navigated them through the terminal to a waiting car, expertly deflecting reporters with practice statements about forthcoming press conferences. Once inside the vehicle, she turned to Zara with genuine concern. "Are you all right?" That was intense even by New York standards. "I'm okay," Zara assured her, though the adrenaline crash was beginning to take its toll. Just processing everything. "Your mother has arranged a suite at the Pierre," Aisha explained as the car pulled away from the curb. "We have a strategy meeting set up with some key allies in an hour if you're up for it." Harold, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward. "Aisha Robinson, you argued the Westmoreland transportation equity case last year, didn't you?" Aisha's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Yes, I did." "And you're Harold Reynolds. Your work on Crawford is required reading for our legal fellows. Seems we have a formidable legal team assembling," Harold remarked with satisfaction. At the Pierre, Governor Washington had commandeered a conference suite that now hummed with activity. Civil rights attorneys conferred in corners while social media strategists monitored online reaction. The governor herself was engaged in an intense phone conversation when Zara entered but immediately ended the call to embrace her daughter. "You've started quite the movement," she said, holding Zara at arm's length to examine her. "Are you sure you're ready for this? We can still arrange for you to attend your seminar as planned." Zara glanced around the room at the assembled team, working on a situation that had begun with her simple refusal to surrender her seat. "I think the seminar can wait. This seems more important right now." As the strategy meeting convened, Zara found herself at a table surrounded by some of the most prominent civil rights advocates in the country. Harold Reynolds sat to her right, while Aisha Robinson began outlining their approach on a digital whiteboard. Atlantic Airways has issued a standard apology, citing an unfortunate misunderstanding, and announced the suspension of Flight Attendant Wilson pending investigation, Aisha reported. Their stock has dropped 6 points since market opening, and their social media channels are overwhelmed. "Not good enough," Governor Washington stated firmly. "A single suspension treats this as an isolated incident rather than addressing the systemic issues." Harold nodded in agreement. "I've been tracking similar incidents across their routes for the past year. It's a pattern, not an anomaly." As the discussion continued, Zara noticed a notification on her phone. Atlantic Airways had released an official video statement from their CEO, Richard Bertram. The room fell silent as they played it on the suite's large screen. "On behalf of Atlantic Airways, I want to personally apologize to Miss Zara Washington for her experience on our flight today." The CEO began his expression, appropriately grave. "The actions of our employee do not reflect our company values or policies. We have terminated the flight attendant in question and will be conducting mandatory sensitivity training for all customer-facing staff." Aisha paused the video. Classic deflection. They've identified a scapegoat and promised vague training initiatives. Nothing about systemic changes or acknowledging the pattern. Just then, Zara's phone lit up with a series of text notifications from a number she didn't recognize. She gasped as she read them. "What is it?" her mother asked. Zara looked up stunned. "It's from someone claiming to be an Atlantic Airways executive." They say the company has been using a demographic scoring system that flags passengers who statistically deviate from cabin norms for additional verification. She passed her phone to Aisha, who read the messages with growing alarm. "If this is legitimate, it's explosive," Aisha said. A codified system of profiling would take this from individual bias to corporate policy. While the legal team huddled to authenticate the messages, Zara slipped away to a quiet corner of the suite. The events of the day had been overwhelming, and she needed a moment to center herself. To her surprise, she found a group of young black women waiting to speak with her college students who had been attending a conference in New York and had come to offer support after seeing her video. "What you did today matters," said one, introducing herself as Keisha. "I've given up my seat when challenged, just to avoid the humiliation. Watching you stand your ground gave me courage." For the next hour, Zara sat with these peers, sharing experiences of discrimination both subtle and overt. Their stories ranged from being mistaken for service staff at upscale stores to having campus security called when studying late in university libraries. Each account reinforced what Zara had already begun to understand. Her individual experience was part of a much larger pattern woven into American society. When she rejoined the strategy meeting, Zara's perspective had shifted. This was no longer just about one incident on one flight. It was about challenging the systems that normalized such treatment. "We need to do more than win a settlement," she announced, interrupting a discussion about potential damages. All eyes turned to her. "If we settle even for a record amount, Atlantic Airways will write it off as a cost of doing business and continue their practices." Harold smiled approvingly. "What do you propose instead?" "A class action lawsuit," Zara said firmly. "We use my case as the starting point, but invite others who've experienced similar discrimination to join. We demand structural changes, not just financial compensation. That's a much longer, more difficult fight." Aisha cautioned, though. Her expression suggested she approved of the approach. "I'm 17, Zara replied with a small smile. "I have time." As the meeting continued with renewed purpose, Governor Washington watched her daughter with pride. This wasn't the future she had envisioned for Zara, at least not so soon. But the young woman rising to the occasion before her was everything she had raised her, to be principled, courageous, and unwilling to accept injustice even when the easier path lay open before her. That evening, instead of attending the opening reception of her law seminar, Zara sat before cameras in a televised interview that would be seen by millions. With poise beyond her years, she announced the formation of the Transportation Equality Initiative and invited others who had experienced similar discrimination to come forward. "This isn't just about first-class airplane seats," she told the nation. "It's about first-class citizenship, something that should be available to everyone, regardless of their appearance." As the broadcast concluded, her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "You've found your altitude. Fly high." 3 months after the incident that had transformed Zara Washington from an ambitious teenager into a reluctant civil rights icon, the federal courthouse in Manhattan hummed with anticipation. The preliminary hearing for Washington versus Atlantic Airways had drawn national attention, with legal experts predicting years of procedural wrangling before any meaningful resolution. Inside the imposing building, Zara smoothed her navy blazer, a gift from her mother for the occasion. At 17, she was the youngest named plaintiff in a class action that had swelled to include over 200 individuals who had experienced similar discrimination across multiple airlines. Nervous Harold Reynolds asked, adjusting his bow tie beside her. "A little," Zara admitted, "but ready." The courtroom doors opened, revealing a space already packed with journalists, airline representatives, and supporters. At the plaintiff's table sat Aisha Robinson alongside a team of attorneys from the National Legal Defense Coalition. The airline had assembled an equally impressive array of corporate lawyers, their tables stacked with binders and tablets. Judge Eleanor Michaels, known for her no-nonsense approach to civil rights cases, entered and called the court to order. "We're here for preliminary arguments in Washington et al. Versus Atlantic Airways," she announced. "I understand the plaintiff wishes to make an opening statement." Zara rose, her heart pounding but her voice steady as she addressed the court. "Your Honor, 3 months ago, I was humiliated and discriminated against for simply occupying the space I had rightfully purchased. What I didn't know then was that my experience was part of a deliberate pattern of discrimination masked as corporate policy." She detailed not only her own experience, but the stories of dozens of others who had come forward. The doctor removed from first class while wearing scrubs, the tech entrepreneur mistaken for the flight attendant, the retired veteran asked repeatedly for proof of his ticket. Each incident, when viewed in isolation, could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. Together, they formed an unmistakable pattern. "We are not seeking only financial compensation," Zara concluded. "We are seeking structural change to ensure that transportation, a public necessity, is truly accessible with dignity to all." As Zara returned to her seat, murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The airline's lead counsel rose next, a polished man in his 50s, with the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to winning. "Your Honor, while we sympathize with Miss Washington's experience, we categorically deny any pattern of discrimination. Atlantic Airways serves millions of passengers annually of all backgrounds. The incident in question was an unfortunate aberration resulting from a single employee's poor judgment for which that employee has been terminated." Judge Michaels peered over her glasses. "Counsel, are you prepared to provide documentation regarding passenger verification practices? The plaintiffs have made specific allegations about demographic profiling algorithms." "We believe those allegations are based on mischaracterized information, Your Honor. Atlantic Airways uses standard industry practices for security and customer service." The judge's expression hardened slightly. "That wasn't my question, counsel. I asked if you're prepared to produce documentation. We would request protective orders for any proprietary business information." "Duly noted. We'll address specific confidentiality concerns as they arise." Judge Michaels made a notation in her files. "Now I understand there's a motion to introduce new evidence." Aisha Robinson stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have received information from a whistleblower within Atlantic Airways' customer analytics department that directly contradicts the company's public statements." The airline's attorneys erupted in objections but fell silent when the courtroom doors opened unexpectedly. A murmur of surprise swept through the gallery as Brandon Cooper, the businessman who had sat across from Zara on that fateful flight, strode confidently down the center aisle. "Your Honor," Aisha continued once order was restored. "Mr. Brandon Cooper, CEO of Vertex Technologies, has provided our team with documentation that his company developed the passenger demographic scoring system currently in use by Atlantic Airways and 4 other major carriers." Cooper approached the witness stand after being sworn in. Under questioning, he revealed how his data analytics firm had created an algorithm ostensibly to help airlines identify high-value customers for premium service. The system assigns probability scores based on demographic factors including age, apparent ethnicity, attire, and speech patterns to determine whether a passenger belongs in premium cabins. Cooper explained his former arrogance, replaced with the careful precision of someone navigating legal jeopardy. Atlantic Airways implemented this system 3 years ago under their Customer Profile Management Initiative. "And why are you coming forward with this information now, Mr. Cooper?" Aisha asked. Cooper's gaze flickered briefly to Zara. "Because what happened on that flight was wrong. And because continuing this system, knowing its discriminatory impact, would make me complicit in that wrong." What he didn't mention, though, many in the room suspected, was that Vertex Technologies' state contracts were still under review by Governor Washington's administration. creating powerful motivation for his sudden attack of complete conscience. As evidence of the scoring system entered the court record, journalists rushed from the room to file breaking stories. By lunchtime, Atlantic Airways stock had plummeted 17%, and emergency board meetings were being convened at airline headquarters across the country. When court reconvened after the midday break, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The airline's lead counsel requested a brief recess to confer with his clients, who had apparently received urgent new instructions from their board of directors. "Your Honor," he announced upon returning, "in the interest of resolving this matter expeditiously, Atlantic Airways would like to propose settlement terms." What followed stunned even the most optimistic supporters of the case. Beyond substantial financial compensation for all plaintiffs, the airline offered to completely dismantle its demographic scoring system, implement transparent boarding and seating verification procedures across all cabins, and establish an every-by-two maxed, independent oversight committee to monitor compliance. Most surprisingly, they proposed creating a passenger advocacy office funded by the airline, but operating independently, with Zara Washington invited to sit on its founding advisory board once she reached 18. "This is unprecedented," Harold whispered as the terms were read aloud. "They're surrendering before the battle has truly begun." Judge Michaels, while welcoming the airline's apparent change of heart, ordered a full evidentiary review of the proposed changes to ensure they represented meaningful reform rather than cosmetic adjustments. "This court will maintain jurisdiction to oversee implementation," she declared. "Settlement does not end our interest in ensuring compliance." As the hearing concluded, Zara found herself surrounded by her fellow plaintiffs, people of various backgrounds, united by common experiences of discrimination, and now by an unexpected victory. Tears flowed freely as they embraced, many expressing disbelief that their collective action had yielded such swift results. Outside the courthouse, Zara stood beside her mother at a forest of microphones, announcing the creation of the Zara Washington Foundation, which would use her portion of the settlement to provide legal support to victims of transportation discrimination nationwide. "Today marks a beginning, not an end," she told the assembled press. "True equality means being able to move through the world literally and figuratively without having your right to exist in certain spaces questioned." 1 year later, Zara Washington sat in her dormitory room at Howard University, where she had just begun her freshman year as a pre-law student. On her wall hung framed news articles about what the media had dubbed the first-class case, alongside a photograph of her with Harold Reynolds at the official launch of the Transportation Equality Initiative. Her phone rang with a familiar number, Harold calling for their weekly check-in. "Did you see the quarterly report?" he asked when she answered. "Discrimination complaints across all major airlines down 47% since implementation of the new verification protocols." "I saw," Zara confirmed. "The foundation has been receiving more thank you letters than complaints lately." "That's progress," Harold said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "By the way, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something I couldn't share until certain statutes of limitations expired." Zara sat up straight, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "Brandon Cooper didn't come forward out of nowhere," Harold explained. "After my granddaughter's death, I took a consulting position with Vertex Technologies' legal department under a different name. I spent 11 months gathering evidence about the scoring system before I happened to be on your flight that day." "You infiltrated the company?" Zara asked, astonished. "Let's call it strategic legal research," Harold replied with a chuckle. "When I saw you stand your ground on that plane, I knew I'd found the perfect plaintiff to bring it all to light. I may have encouraged Cooper to cooperate by sharing what I knew about certain federal contracting regulations his company had skirted." Zara shook her head in amazement. "All this time I thought it was coincidence that you were on that flight. There are no coincidences in civil rights work, young lady. Only opportunities seized or squandered." His voice softened. "Amara would have been about your age now. She wanted to be a doctor to help people in her own way. Zara glanced at her calendar where she had circled an upcoming date. The dedication ceremony for the Amara Reynolds Memorial Scholarship is next month. Mom and I will both be there. As they said their goodbyes, Zara moved to her window overlooking the historic Howard campus. From her first-class airplane seat to the federal courthouse to this prestigious university, her journey had been about occupying spaces where others believed she didn't belong, and then transforming those spaces for those who would come after her. On her desk sat a small jar containing glass shards, her mother's gift when she left for college. A reminder that shattering glass ceilings wasn't the end goal. It was what you built with the pieces that truly mattered. This powerful story reminds us that discrimination often hides behind policies and procedures that seem neutral on the surface. Zara's courage in refusing to accept injustice, even when compliance would have been easier, created ripples of change that benefited thousands of others facing similar treatment. It demonstrates how systemic discrimination requires systemic solutions, not just individual accountability. The story also highlights the importance of allies in different positions. From Harold's behind-the-scenes work gathering evidence to Governor Washington's institutional leverage to the passengers who spoke up in support, meaningful change required a coalition of voices. One person standing alone is vulnerable, but a community standing together is powerful. Perhaps most importantly, Zara's journey shows that our responsibility doesn't end with personal vindication. True justice involves ensuring others don't face the same barriers. By establishing a foundation rather than simply accepting a personal settlement, Zara transformed an individual injury into collective healing. The path to equality isn't about special treatment. It's about ensuring everyone receives the dignity and respect they're entitled to, regardless of appearance, background, or circumstances. Your seat assignment might be first-class economy or somewhere in between, but your humanity is never negotiable. What situation have you witnessed where someone was treated unfairly based on how they looked? Would you have had the courage to speak up like Zara did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you to stand a little taller against injustice, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of everyday heroes making extraordinary change. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement to speak their truth today. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community. And remember, the most powerful tool against discrimination is your unwavering voice.